The devil's on the loose and he's dancing with the mummy.
Deep from the bowels of the Macabre Theater Laboratory, we bring you Macabre Cast. Dark Mark and Karis, the Little Mummy, here to bring you another episode of Macabre Cast, where we'll be dropping R's where they belong and adding them where they don't. Hello, Karis. Newbies, welcome. Regulars, welcome back. Worshippers, get out of here. Please remember to like and subscribe. There is nothing wrong with your YouTube dial. You are exactly where you should be. The slush puppy machine is on and it's cold. And your favorite horror mag is on the stand just behind Women's Wear Daily and Cosmopolitan. This is the world of Macabre Cast.
Hey, Dark. Why did the ghost leave the party early?
I don't know, Karis. Why did the ghost leave the party early?
He had to get his sheet together.
And on that note, it's time for Horror News.
Life's river shall rise, she said. Open only the strong shall survive, she said. But I'm feeling quite weak, she said.
Robert Englund and John Carpenter will be receiving their star on the Walk of Fame as part of the class of 2025. And Rob Zombie is all the rage of controversy with the release of his children's book, Z is for Zombie, a children's book that helps kids learn the alphabet, taught by the serial killers from his film House of a Thousand Corpses. I'm sure this wasn't really made for children, more for adults who want something funny for their coffee table. I was just wondering how he was able to write anything without the constant use of F-bombs. Sources close to the production of Saw 11, which was supposed to reach theaters in September, has been canceled. Want to play a game? Well, too bad. Saw has taken its ball and gone home. Wednesday, the popular Netflix series will include lots of horror film references, including episode based on slashers in Season 2. Night of the Living Dead, the official story of the film, 192-page book, is set to hit shelves in September. And that's it for Horror News.
She said.
And Brownie agrees. Brownie, the corpse-sniffing dog.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
So one of my favorite nonfiction books is a book about horror movies, Dance Macabre by Stephen King. This was a lighthearted book on all of King's favorite and not-so-favorite horror movies, starting when he was a kid. The book is pretty dated at this point because it doesn't reference anything beyond 1980. And I do remember in the book him talking about the original 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers, starring Kevin McCarthy. And hands down, this is a superb sci-fi horror film that bleeds paranoia. But in the book Dance Macabre, King compares it against the remake in 1978 starring Donald Sutherland and says that the remake pales in comparison, that it lacks the foreboding paranoia of the small town of the original, because the remake takes place in a large city. Well, this is where King and I part company. I saw this in the theater when it opened, and I had seen and was well aware of the original, and personally I found it 100 times more frightening to feel alone, different, and watching something like this unfold in a ginormous city. I found it so much more frightening. And it was definitely a solid film. I don't think he gives it the credit it deserves. And I bring this up because I watched it again recently over the past weekend, and it still holds up. I love it. I recommend this over the original, to be quite honest. So if you haven't seen that at this point, it's the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers starring Donald Sutherland. Laura Horror picked out an early 1990s film that we hadn't seen in quite a while, Flatliners, with Kiefer Sutherland Donald Sutherland's kid, Julia Roberts, William Baldwin, and Kevin Bacon. And all I can think about every time I see this movie is that this is when Julia and Kiefer's relationship went south. Laura Harr loves this film. Me, not so much. And every time I try to put my finger on it and why it's not a big one with me, I can't. I don't know why, what it is about this movie that I just think it's okay. For those unfamiliar, this was about a group of med students purposely dying for so many minutes while the others resurrect them so that they can report on what's on the other side, and meanwhile their sins take on a physical form and chase them around. It's always been a pretty popular film, especially at the time. I don't know what my problem is. I really don't. And I also watched the 1970 Giallo film by Dario Argento, Bird with the Crystal Plumage, about an American writer vacationing in Rome that witnesses the attack of a serial killer. And now the killer is after him and his girlfriend. It's a great film and worth the watch if you can track it down. I actually have in a frame one of the lobby cards when that film came out that I got at a trade show.
I hope you die, die monster, die, die monster, die, die monster, die.
So here we are at episode 98. One more episode and then we'll be at the epic 100th. And I know there are monster kids out there that you want to send in a voice message. You want to be more part of the show. This is your perfect chance, the 100th episode. Now, what I'm going to do on episode 99, I'm coming up with a series of trivia questions. I'm going to ask trivia questions throughout the show. And on the 100th episode, it would be neat for Drac Pack and Monster Kids to call in answers to their questions. Now, no cheating. There's no looking it up, no Googling. Be honest with yourself. Be an honest Monster Kid. But that's one of the plans for the 100th. Will be trivia throughout the show. And again, I implore these Monster Kids who listen every week but never send in a voice message or never send in pictures of their horror merch. Come on now. You're only a step away. We believe in you.
I'm knocking at the door. Somebody ringing the bell. Someone's knocking at the door. Somebody ringing the bell. Do me a
Horror
favor.
Chat's got a knock that just rocks the lab.
Let 'em in.
Hey, Dark Mark, Little Karis, and all the Monster Kids hanging out at the Macabre Theater this week. It's Horror Chat Matt checking in. Dark, in response to your question of I've ever read 11/22/63 by the great Stephen King, the answer is of course I have. And I also did take in the miniseries from a couple of years ago, and I did enjoy it. As usual, I do lean more towards favoring the book over the miniseries. That was one of his longer recent novels. I think it was clocking in as close to 1,000 pages, somewhere in that neighborhood. Great story, very enjoyable characters and alternate history. Like I said, I did enjoy the miniseries, but it got me thinking because you mentioned that your son really enjoyed the miniseries. If I wasn't such a diehard King fan, or a constant reader as he refers to us, would my expectations always be as high for these miniseries and movies because I've already read the source material? And if I could just go into it and just enjoy the movie and miniseries for what it is, would I enjoy more of them than I currently do? As we talked about in the past, there's definitely been some that I've really loved, and others where I love the book and just don't care that much for whatever the adaptation was. Just something I was thinking about. I guess the old saying is sometimes ignorance is bliss. And I could just, sit down and watch these things and enjoy them for what they are, not compare them to the books, but it is what it is. Speaking of reading, it's time to take a trip down to your local comic book shop for a Horror Chat Matt Spinner Rack chat. As we all know, Marvel Comics and Star Wars and 20th Century Fox and pretty much anything else that I've enjoyed as a child has been gobbled up by Disney, and they own everything now. And just recently, in the last couple of years, they finally started publishing some Predator, Terminator, and Alien comics. And in the last year or so, they finally started crossing over with some of their Marvel characters for some really good matchups. They've had Predator versus Black Panther, Wolverine versus Predator. There's currently an Aliens versus Avengers title. That one's not as easy to get into if you aren't really up to date on your Marvel history, as it's you need a lot of the background information to enjoy that storyline. And they just announced a crossover that I'm really looking forward to, Spider-Man vs. Predator, with a really great cover that I will include for you to share. Reminded me back in the, 90s when Terminator, Predator, and Aliens were published by Dark Horse Comics, and they did a legit crossover with DC Comics, and they had Superman take on Aliens and Batman take on Predator, and those two first miniseries were really, really good stuff. Hoping this Spider-Man versus Predator will live up to that first Batman versus Predator, and the Superman versus Aliens was really good from what I can remember. And they also did one other crossover back in the day with a company that's currently owned by DC Comics now. It was a offshoot of Image Comics, and they actually, 99% of all these stories don't really count towards any continuum. They just, they're off in their own universe and just a one-off story. But they had a comic series called Wildstorm, and they crossed over with Aliens, and this had lasting repercussions for their characters, where several main characters died. So I'd be curious to see if Marvel ever decides to go that route. As always, Dark, keep in mind Macabrecast, and I cannot wait for that 100th episode. We keep getting closer and closer, and that poor door of yours is taking a beating.
Horror Chat, give me your thoughts on The Shining miniseries that was made for cable TV. Please enlighten me. King was so convinced that it had to follow the book exactly. How did that work out for you? Anyway, we love to hear from you week after week. Horror Chat Matt, please have a good one and hope to see you soon.
Horrible mention.
This week's horrible mention is 1991's Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. We'd introduced to a long-lost daughter of Freddy Krueger. A portion of the film is in 3D, and Robert Englund has a flashback sequence before his character was burned to a crisp, including a segment with Freddy's father, played by Alice Cooper. Johnny Depp returns in a cameo on a television show. How could this possibly be bad, right? Easy, in 1991, they still hadn't broken away from that tongue-in-cheek, make-fun-of-itself mantra that started with Part 4. Freddy wasn't scary anymore, and it played a lot like slapstick. Not due to Robert Englund. I'm sure he would have loved to have returned to what Freddy once was. He proved that in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. That film was only hindered by its terrible CGI. Yeah, Freddy's Dead was neat to see in the theater with the 3D, Brian May's soundtrack, but it just wasn't enough to save this turkey. Add Tom Arnold and Roseanne Barr to the roster, and you've all but sunk the ship. 1991's Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare is this week's
horrible mention.
Is this something you could share with the rest of us, Amazing Larry?
Greetings, Dark Mark and Karis, a little mummy. Scary Larry is back. Now, I was observing you and Horror Chat Matt going back and forth on which horror movie is closest to the book or even better than. I myself am not a fan of King's novels, but I'm a huge fan of Dean Koontz. I've read well over 3/4 of his books. I'm going to give you my list of worst to best adaptations of his novels to movies. The Funhouse. While the movie itself was an entertaining Tobe Hooper romp, the book and the movie are not aligned. In some weird twist, the movie actually was released before the book was. I read that Koontz was so displeased that he had a back and forth with the studio involving some hilarious letters and Godzilla, and asked to have any reference to him removed. Hysterical, since he wrote it under a pseudonym in the first place. Watchers. This is one where I saw the Corey Haim movie, then years later I read the book. I actually think I avoided the book for a while since I saw the movie. It was so far removed from the book, it actually made me mad. It would have been a better thing if they made this into like a miniseries, kind of like how they do the seasons of Reacher. Hideaway. Well, I felt choosing Jeff Goldblum and Elisa Silverstone were poor casting choices. Jeremy Sisto nailed the antagonist Visaggio brilliantly. Phantoms. A bit closer to the book. Peter O'Toole was excellent in it, but Ben Affleck was a mismatch. Mr. Murder. Stephen Baldwin, arguably the sanest of the Baldwin brothers, did a great job of a horror writer meeting his evil doppelganger. Odd Thomas. The late Anton Yelchin was excellent as a guy who sees ghosts. I honestly feel if he didn't die from that tragic accident, he would have made 2 or 3 more Odd Thomas movies based on the book series. Finally, the closest Koontz adaptation from book to film had to be the 2-part TV movie Intensity. Fabulous job of sticking to the book as closely as possible. John C. McGinley is a funny guy, but man, he can play psycho almost as well as Anthony Hopkins' portrayal as Hannibal Lecter. The only quibble I have, and it's not much, but it was a made-for-TV movie in the late 90s, so the graphic violence of the book was extremely whitewashed in this cable flick. It was cable, not premium cable. That's all I got for this week.
When I first met Laura Hara, she was a big Dean Koontz fan and reader. I myself have only read one of his books. I don't remember what the name of it is, but I'm pretty sure it involved a serial killer rapist who kept surgically having flesh added to a particular area. I don't even know what you call that. I don't even know that if that's a thing, if you can do that. But
ew, seriously? That is so gross.
And I could be getting it completely wrong, but that's all I really remember. And as you know, I am a big Stephen King fan, but honestly, last book I read was 11/22/63. That was the most recent, which is recent, but everything else is like before the 90s. I did love The Funhouse, the film, Tobe Hooper's film. Had no idea Dean Koontz was attached to that. And obviously, as you say, Scary, not even the same as the book. And I know I have that book. I think I have an old paperback of The Funhouse. And as you said, it doesn't even have Dean Koontz's name on it. He's under a different name. I'm going to have to dig through my old box of books and see if I can't find that. But, as always, Scary, thank you for seeing it so we don't have to. They say dress for success, and, well, I agree. But what better way to show who you really are than with horror merch? You could sport your very own Macabre Cast t-shirt. Or maybe, baby, it's cold outside. Then snag a Macabre Cast beanie. T-shirts $13, beanies $25. Both prices include your shipping.
Life is a mystery. Everyone
Bless me, Charis, for I have sinned. Well, we've never determined that these are actual sins. Well, it's safe to say, I think, that at least they're not cardinal sins. But it's been a few episodes since my last confession, and although this one is popular with the majority, I was never a fan of American Psycho. Maybe because I never read the book, or I just didn't see the satire of the me generation. But no, sorry to say, just not a fan of American Psycho. I'm sorry.
Oh, my son, some do not getteth what thy dost understandeth. You are absolved.
Hello, Dark Mark. Hello, Karis. Grim Kim checking in. I'm a little slap happy right now. It's taking forever to get these utilities changed over. Like, to be on the phone with someone. And anyway, I haven't watched a damn thing. But I really enjoyed hearing you guys, Matt and Mark, your lists of movies. And I just wanted to throw a couple. I just had to think real quick. I was like, what was going to come off the top of my head? My all-time favorite. And well, Matt, you had specified non-horror, but I must say a couple of my choices are a fringe horror, I would say, and that's just the way it is. So, here's a couple that I'm going to throw your way. I mentioned to Mark, I love Goodbye Girl. That was one that on his list, which is so comprehensive, that caught my eye. I think I said that. Okay. Kim's top whatever. Harold and Maude. I mean, just number one, all-time favorite. So it is reassuring knowing I have at least one all-time tip-top favorite. Life is all around us. That's what Maude says. Okay. 2, Cool Hand Luke. Like, say no more. You know, really. What scene do you want to talk about? They're all just fantastic. The car scene? Car washing scene? Okay, we can talk about that. Number 3, Rosemary's Baby. And yes, it's horror, Matt. I understand. It's vintage horror. It's different. I just love this movie so much. Part of the reason, which I've mentioned to Mark before, is because my sister, grim twin, just really looked a lot like Mia Farrow when we were back in high school. And I just have a tender spot. You know what? I think there is like a prequel to that. I need to watch or read that. Someone tell me. Okay, another. Matt, I'm sorry. It's horror adjacent, perhaps. Leave Her to Heaven with Gene Tierney back in, 1940s, 50s. It is a great movie about this pretty little unhinged thing. And what lengths would she go through to get what she wants? And it's fantastic. Okay, 2 more. I'll say number 5 or whatever it is. Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, I really had to reach and think, I'm going to throw Airplane in there too. It's hard with the comedies, but those two definitely have a soft spot in my heart. I mean, I am part Napoleon Dynamite. That might be why. Okay, let's round her up to something that was horrifying to me and my sister, and then I watched it again just a few years ago. It's hard to find it, but I tracked it down and I watched it, and yes, it was horrifying, the same, even as a middle-aged lady, and that is Diane Keaton in Looking for Mr. Goodbar. And yeah, that was intense, and it was just really good, and I love Diane Keaton. Anyway, I was just flipping through, and I saw an ad. Netflix had dropped the titles for Black Mirror coming up April 10th. I am so looking forward to that. It just irks me to no end. Mark, I think you mentioned how they take so long in between seasons of everything now. It's so stupid. Really. I want to see something, stronger than irksome, but I don't want to have to get foghorned out, so I won't. Okay, I will see you monster kids on the other side of my move, and I don't know, I'll have to come up with another reason to be slap happy. It just might be a general state of being. Who knows? At any rate, take care, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah, I do love that show, Black Mirror, that was on Netflix. I don't even think I saw the last season. Maybe the last 2 seasons they show. I don't know. I kind of lost track with that because, like you said, it takes so long sometimes, and we get caught up in other things. And as far as a prequel to Rosemary's Baby, unless that was something new, I know nothing about it. But if you're referring to old, there was a sequel to Rosemary's Baby. It was a TV movie in 1976 called Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby, which, if it were my call, I would have called it Whatever Happened to Rosemary's Baby. But it's called Look What Happened to Rosemary's Baby, 1976. The general plot description of the film is that basically, Adrian, I think that was the child's name, must cope with the fact that he's Satan's kid, but is not living up to his expectations. I was too young to really remember this. I just remember the ads in the TV guide and on TV. As I said, I would have preferred Whatever Happened to Rosemary's Baby, but it's called Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby. And the only returning member was Ruth Gordon. And Patty Duke was in this film, but she publicly stated that she regretted being in it. I did see this on Amazon. You can get the DVD on Amazon, but for a while I think this was a tough find. Always great to hear from you, Grim Kim. Hope to hear from you again soon. We never see ourselves the way others do. Powerful statement, and somehow scary. If I'm seen as anything, I hope it's as an entertainer and a decent human being. Well, I try to be anyway. Remember, be good to yourself. This is Dark Mark, signing off. I'll see you soon. I hope. This is a Macabre Theater production. Macabre Cast.